no, the smiles that Gail invited. I want to thank you, Gail, for bringing this beautiful hymn to us today. I never heard this before. In this very room. I went on YouTube, and there are actually a number of beautiful versions of it. But I think it's perfect as we gather together again in this very room for the first time in the 484 days it's been since March 15th, 2020. In this very room, we are completely, thoroughly, reliably, inextricably bathing in the presence, the power, the love of the Christ of us. In this very room, we are invisibly interwoven into the substance of the infinite truth of the fundamental being of all reality. In this very room, we are relieved of all suffering, all fear, all doubt, relieved of the limitations of poor health, of pandemics, of poverty, of loneliness. In fact, we are relieved of the illusions of life and death themselves. So I invite us to take a moment to feel the presence of the indwelling Christ in this very room. Let's look around, take in what we see. Let's listen to the sounds that come across the space. Let's look around and regard one another. Brothers and sisters separated for too long. And that those of us sitting here cast our awareness to those of us connecting via Zoom in this very room. And let those of us listening and watching on Zoom come into this space through the presence and the power of the indwelling Christ that unites us always. So regardless of where we may physically be present, let's cast our focus on how God is presencing God in us now. Notice how our feet feel as they rest upon the floor. God is presencing itself in our feet. Notice how the air feels as it circulates, and we feel it on our arms and faces. God is presencing itself in our arms and faces. Notice whatever our thoughts are telling us about what you're hearing me say. God is presencing itself in our thoughts. Notice the place in which we find ourselves. God is presencing God in this very space, up, down, and all around. For we are not just sitting in a physical chamber, wonderful as it is to be back where we hold our meetings. No, it's in that secret inner chamber that is the center of our eternal being, where we encounter the presence and power of God. Remember what Jesus says in the book of Matthew, "But thou, when thou prayest, enter into thine inner chamber, and having shut thy door, pray to thy Father who is in secret. And thy Father who seeth in secret shall recompense thee. Your Father knoweth what things ye have need of before you ask him." This inner chamber of which Jesus speaks is the very room we are always dwelling in, where we find ourselves centered in God, equally as God is centered in us. No matter what our physical senses may be telling us, our true home and place is in the very heart of God. In Lessons in Truth, Emily Cady devotes an entire chapter to the practice of consciously centering ourselves in this inner chamber, a chapter called "The Secret Place of the Most High." The Secret Place of the Most High. The title comes from Psalm 91. And here's some of what we read there. The psalmist writes, "He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress. My God, in Him I will trust. Because thou hast made the Lord, which is my refuge, even the Most High, thy habitation, there shall be no evil to befall thee, neither shall any plague come near thy dwelling. In this inner secret chamber, we are safe and secure. Now, Dr. Katie emphasizes that we have no choice, we must retreat into the secret inner chamber at every opportunity. It's a secret chamber because it's a place to which we must go on our own. No other person, no external condition can take us there. She says, it is a secret place because it is a place of meeting between the Christ at the center of your being and your consciousness. A hidden place into which no outside person can either induct you or enter himself. We must drop the idea that this place of realization of our divinity can be given to us by any human being. No one can come into it from the outside. And so we have to go there alone as a way of consciously and deliberately cutting ourselves off from all outside interference. So when we decide to surrender ourselves to the love and care of God, we necessarily release all dependence upon and attachment to the things and people of the world. We must turn our focus inward, undistracted by any and all external activity. Dr. Katie reminds us, if you have been thus far on the way, cultivating and enlarging only the mental side of truth, the intellect, as is probably the case, as it was for me for many years, you need, in order to come into the fullness of understanding, to let the mental, the reasoning side rest a while. Become as little children, and learning how to be still, listen to that which the Father will say to you through the intuitional part of your being. The light that you so crave will come out of the deep silence and become manifest to you from within yourself, if you will but keep still and look at it from that source. My friends, our spiritual practice often seems difficult. For whether we want them to or not, our senses are always delivering impacts upon our awareness. We cannot stop feeling, thinking, reacting, or changing. It often seems as if it's not one thing, it's another. From a practical perspective, life is just an endless series of problems that we have to solve. And solving problems involves applying all of our human faculties. Now, 500 years before Jesus, the Buddha came to understand that all suffering comes from our attachment to our human faculties and situations. And Jesus echoed the Buddha's insight when he told Pontius Pilate, "My kingdom is not of this world." And in his letter to the Colossians, Paul elaborated on this. He said, "If you then be risen with Christ, seek those things which are above, where Christ sits at the right hand of God. Set your affection on the things above, not on things of the earth." So when we retire to our secret inner chamber, we can sit in the divine silence and shed any and all attachments we have to being in charge of the outcomes of our lives. We can let go of the things of the earth. We can wrap ourselves in the blanket of God's eternal affection. We can then, with God's gentle and patient help, set, as Paul says, our affection on things above, not on things on the earth. That is, set our affection on God alone. Now, if this sounds familiar, we know this is the golden key. Take our attention away from external circumstances of every kind and focus instead on God. Well, how? How do we focus on God? By placing our awareness on our inner secret room where God burns as a spiritual sun. When we retreat into this chamber, all external conditions, fears, doubts, disappointments disappear. As the Sufi poet Rumi put it, absorbed in the attributes of God, even as the star disappears in the presence of the sun. As we all know all too well, it takes constant, daily practice to train our focus to remain on God, to make the inner chamber our outer experience as well. In the Gospel of Thomas, Jesus teaches us, when you make the two into one, and make the inner like the outer, and the outer like the inner, and the upper like the lower, then you will enter into the kingdom of heaven. So how do we do this in practice? How do we make the inner like the outer, and the outer like the inner? Well, as true students, we know the drill. I could ask any one of us to come up here and tell us how we do this. Denials, affirmation, surrender. Denials, affirmations, surrender. Whenever I have a thought that pulls me down, that focuses me on earth instead of on God, that stimulates fear, keeping me focused on the supposed cause of the problem, I train myself to deny it power. I notice when something happens and I experience fear. I am present to how this causes a chain reaction in my body and my mind, powered by secretions of adrenaline and cortisol, potent hormones that have the ability to overwhelm rational thought. So, for example, on my way back here from Houston this last week, I had a very tight connection to make in Phoenix. And so I experienced fear that the slightest delay in getting out of Houston would make me miss my connection in Phoenix and keep me there in 120 degrees heat. And the moment I started imagining what would it be like if that happened, I freaked out. I felt powerless and angry, and nothing had actually happened. Now, I've done our practice long enough to recognize that here was yet another opportunity to apply the golden key. Because of the physical sensations from the adrenaline and the cortisol that the thoughts of missing my plane had stimulated, I knew that I had to start with denials. I had to tell my mind to strip these thoughts of the power of fear. I am safe in God, so nothing bad will happen. Nothing bad will happen. These fears are not real. But this is tough stuff, right? Easy to say. Our emotional bodies don't necessarily respond on a dime to these denials. So also I had to surrender. I had to let go of thinking I could fix the situation, to allow myself to feel what I was feeling and still affirm divine order. And I had to repeat this a number of times. For the demon is wily, and the temptations are relentless. But I've done this work long enough to know persistence pays off. And the truth is, everything went as smoothly as possible. In spite of thunderstorms in the Houston area, my plane left on time, and my connecting flight in Phoenix was on time, and I got home when the airline promised I would. Now, this may not seem like a big deal, but the point is that I've learned to pay enough attention to what we call error consciousness to notice when it shows up. Noticing is the key. That's why we practice meditation. Noticing is the key for whenever I fail to be aware that error consciousness is showing up, I just get caught up in the drama. And I find myself cut off from the peace and presence of God that is always my refuge, as promised in Psalms. This is how we make the outer chamber like our inner chamber. This is how we experience the kingdom that is not of this world. Focus on the indwelling Christ presence, and then let it show itself to us everywhere. Let us commit to allowing every thought of fear, anxiety, desperation, loneliness, agitation become the gateway back to our inner chamber, to the secret place of the Most High, where we always abide in the shadow of the Almighty. And then, safe and secure in God's peace, allow our gaze to return outward to the conditions that disturbed us and see in them only God. And so we come full circle back to this room, this physical room, keeping our focus on God, living life from the inside out, from the inner chamber of unconditional peace and love into the outer world of conditions and limitations, let us give thanks for the opportunity we have today to be with one another in this very room. And we are always mindful of our brothers and sisters watching on Zoom, and we include you in this place. So, 484 days later, here we are again. So I'd like us now to take this opportunity to rededicate, to reconsecrate this space as the sanctuary we have always known it to be. This room is the physical representation of the sacred space that is always, forever holding us together, embracing us as children of God, providing us all we need to manifest our heart's desires on this day and every day for the rest of our lives. So I'd invite us to close our eyes as I share this prayer of consecration that we use here in Unity. Think of the space that we're in, not again just the physical space, but as a representation of the inner chamber. We are here to consecrate this house to God the good. Each room of this house shall henceforth be sacred, and all its occupants feel God's holy presence. No evil can enter here. There is no evil in God. God the good dwells here. Whoever enters here will be conscious of the one divine presence of good. There is only intelligence here. All ignorance is cast out. Whoever enters here will be conscious of the pure, the holy wisdom of God. No untrue thing can enter here. There is no falsehood, no deception, no envy, no jealousy, no selfishness in this house. Every untrue thought is cast out. Whoever enters here will be conscious of the presence of truth. No thought of sickness can enter here. No impurity, no fear can enter here. All weakness and sickness are cast out. Whoever enters here shall be conscious of the presence of health. Whoever enters here will be conscious of plenty, prosperity, even opulence. All foolishness, ignorance, doubt, and superstition are cast out. God is here, and God is security. Whoever enters here will be conscious of God's security. This house is radiant with joy. No thought of sorrow or grief can enter here. All depression is cast out. The joy of the Lord is here. Whoever enters here will be conscious of the presence of radiant joy. Only love dwells here. This house is filled with the presence of love. God is love, and God is here. All anger, hatred, and revenge are cast out. Whoever enters here will be conscious of the pure, the holy presence of love. And this prayer of consecration concludes, we are thankful to Thee, O Father, that this house is filled with Thy presence. We are thankful that we live in Thy light, Thy truth, Thy health, Thy prosperity, Thy peace, Thy wisdom, Thy joy, and Thy love. We are thankful that all who enter here will be conscious of this, Thy holy presence. Amen. So on this special day, my friends, I express my joy at the power of connection with you, not just you in this physical room, well, that's pretty cool, but even you who are listening in maybe as far away as Memphis to this time of joy and getting back together. I give thanks that as a congregation, we have kept faith with each other through the trying times of lockdown and pandemic. Now I understand what Noah and his family felt like. And I give thanks that we have discovered a technology that allows us to share our presence with those who cannot be here physically with us in this very room. So if you feel the same sense of joy and gratitude that I do, let's celebrate that in song. I invite us to turn to number 221. 221. It's a special day. Shall we rise?